Here's Johnny.
I'll be back.
And you will know my name is the Lord.
I'm walking here.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Groovy.
Welcome to Box Office Pulp, the podcast of movies, madness, and moxie. I'm Mike Sen, great ninja warrior of Japan and destined to avenge the Ishida clan by the blade of my silver samurai sword. And I'm joined by Canadian Mountie, beloved friend to animals, and all-around berserker, MB.
Good to be here, Slim.
I imagine you as Patch.
It's the only version of Wolverine I could see myself as. It's like I'm incognito, Logan.
You'd be a good Patch.
I couldn't live up to it.
You're when Patch swears he's not actually Wolverine.
It's always one of the most perplexing disguises. Like Clark Kent, I could buy. Patch is just ridiculous.
It was odd. I mean, it's not as bad as Mr. Fix-It, but...
Do you think he'll ever show up in the movies? Like, do you think we'll see the scene where Hugh Jackman adorns an eye patch?
Hugh Jackman just turns around, he's wearing a tuxedo and eye patch. That would be the greatest thing ever. Like it's a dramatic push-in.
He swears he's not Logan.
You can tell. Oh, that would be awesome though if the movie was marketed as Patch. When you see him in the trailers using his claws and everything, he never refers to himself as Wolverine or Logan the entire time. He swears he's a completely new person. Even the general audience is really confused.
Even like to Rogue, who knows him intimately by this point.
Rogue,
like, no, I'm Patch.
Bub. Anyway, well, not Patch Chance. Here's the episode. On this episode, we'll be discussing the film adaptation of the Chris Claremont, Frank Miller brilliant arc that has no actual name to it at all. The Wolverine is what we're talking about.
Which, thank God we were, because if we weren't and that Patch discussion happened, our sanity wouldn't have been able to handle that.
We'd also be here all night still talking about Patch.
Yeah, which, to be honest, is like, I'm having a hard time not doing anyway, so we should probably move it along.
Yeah, anyway. The Wolverine, ladies and gentlemen.
Bub.
The adaptation of the Japan saga.
Yes, and the technically sequel to X-Men 3.
Yeah, it's the first sequel to X-Men 3.
Yeah.
It actually somehow makes the ending to X-Men 3 good.
Kind of.
It made something good from it.
Yeah, I guess. There is that. And also, it weirdly even has like a sound clip from that movie, which I never...
I noticed that. By the way, spoilers.
Wolverine dies.
Nah,
not really.
it's not possible.
The dies, though.
Oh, the totally fucking dies. We cursed, too. So what were the Wolverine has gotten a lot of flack this year. I mean, it seems like no big tentpole blockbuster summer movie has gone without controversy this year.
Yeah, it seems like more often than not, people have walked away from it with conflicting ideas. Like, some people either really like a certain movie, some people really hate a certain movie. Like, even I was kind of torn on a lot of movies this year. Iron Man 3 I walked out of pretty much completely conflicted about, and not in a good way. Man of Steel, like, I liked it for the most part, still had reservations, and I've just heard very different things about certain movies that I've wanted to see, like Pacific Rim, Elysium, which just came out.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, you can read the review for on our Tumblr and our website.
Yes, boxofficepulp.blogspot.com or boxofficepulp.tumblr.com.
By our beloved Cody Elft.
But the Wolverine really had a lot going against it. For
particularly in the months leading up to it, because you and I are probably the two biggest X-Men fans on this podcast.
Yeah.
I would say that we've kind of got a stigma when it comes to X-Men movies, particularly because a few of them, like, let's just say that this project has been tackled a couple of different times, and it seemed like it was never going to happen, and then it finally did under questionable circumstances.
There was a lot of stigma that this movie had to overcome just going by its production history. Like, even I had to kind of get over the fact that we weren't getting the Aronofsky version of it.
Yeah, which I don't, to be honest, like, I was always kind of mixed on the Aronofsky version because I just didn't know how that version was going to work. Because it's like, he just wanted to do a flat-out adaptation of the comic, 100%.
Yeah.
He wanted to do, like, it would have been panel for panel, page for page.
Yeah.
And he was actually the last director to take on the project before it went into, like, right before it went into production, he dropped out. Or probably in the midst of it.
I think he was on there for about 6 months. He, I mean, everybody's comes up with the reasons, but pretty much the reason he gave was he didn't want to leave the country. This was around the time he was going through his very terrible divorce, I think.
Yeah.
So I think he didn't really want to leave the country for an extended period of time. And at that time, I believe they were going to film in Japan more. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that didn't work out because the, tsunami happened and all that, earthquake.
Yeah. But also, I mean, even beyond production issues, just like, this was the second solo Wolverine movie, and the first one was such a hated movie. It's just such a, like, it just had that stigma of, like, almost a Batman and Robin level, just notoriety to it, where it was almost like you wondered, like, if there was a Wolverine movie that could be done right, almost. Because it's like, Wolverine, like, he's a great character, and I love him to death. He's my favorite X-Men character. One of my favorite Marvel characters of all time, but, like, he doesn't have a lot of material to mine. Like, we were even talking before this podcast, and we were saying, like, what could they do for Wolverine 3?
Yeah.
Really?
It's hard to condense Wolverine down to a 2-hour film. Like,
yeah.
He has some iconic storylines, but as far as, like, let's come up with a Wolverine adventure, you can't really do. You can do that with X-Men, you can do that with Spider-Man and stuff, but it's hard. You can't like it's hard to put Wolverine, like, let's put Wolverine against a villain. It's hard to do that.
Yeah. Especially without just, like, rehashing Sabretooth or doing, like, another Weapon X story or something like that.
And since they already covered the origin, you can't really do a Weapon X mystery story or anything at this point.
Yeah. But the big thing is that the Japan story is probably the single, considered by many to be the single greatest Wolverine story, if not one of the most famous. Like, it's the Dark Knight Returns of Wolverine stories. It's the Kraven's Last Hunt. Like, it's just that big of a story for that character because it came at a moment in time when X-Men comics were really on the rise and Wolverine was really kind of finding his name as his own character. And to do a movie like that, it was, I mean, anyone who took it on was going to have some balls. Because that is one of the single most beloved comics of all time, featuring one of the single most beloved characters of all time. There's only one way you could do it, and that was to screw it up, really. So it was kind of, it didn't really have a chance. And even, like, with James Mangold, like, when we heard James Mangold was going to direct it, like, I thought it was a good choice. It wasn't Aronofsky, but at the same time, it was a good enough choice.
Yeah.
Then the trailer came out, and I liked it, but it's like there were a couple of questionable elements.
Yeah, there was stuff you didn't really... There was a lot you didn't expect. We didn't know a lot of it at that point about the movie, so we were kind of... In our heads, we were still expecting, like, a more super faithful Aronofsky version. Like, I think we all just needed to get over Aronofsky wasn't there. But
yeah. And not only that, but it's like we just didn't know anything. We knew it was the Wolverine in Japan story, but it's like... Once you say that, you just automatically assume, it's going to be the Claremont Miller story. It's not going to be, its own thing. Which, by the time that trailer came out, it was like, this is very much its own thing. Oh crap!
Yeah,
like
we didn't expect the mortality kind of thing built into it. Which, I mean, there was that kind of stuff in the comic. Of course, he was poisoned in the comic, and his healing factor was greatly diminished because of that, much like it is in the movie. So, I mean, it's got inspiration. But the trailer, unfortunately, really only focus. If you look at the trailer now after watching the movie, you're essentially seeing 3 scenes played over and over again in the trailer.
Yeah.
Is all you're really seeing. And that's what screwed us up. I mean, I think even Mangold talked about the marketing was, The international trailers were far better.
Yeah, and even though I did like the teaser, it was like, okay, why is this way? Like, why is... Like, there was a lot of... I think I just kind of have to come out and say it. There was a lot of perceived studio interference the more that we saw this movie, because it's like, all of a sudden we saw characters who didn't have mutant powers have mutant powers. All of a sudden we had, like, this really gimmicky-looking Silver Samurai robot.
Yeah.
Like, we had all these questionable elements that reeked of, like, another Wolverine Origins thing.
Yeah, and we were coming off hearing about the Aronofsky version, which had no mutants other than Wolverine in it. Like, even Silver Samurai in that version probably wasn't going to be a mutant. Technically, he wasn't in this version either, but we'll get to that. And hearing that version was going to be more subtitle, like, we thought the Aronofsky version was going to be the dramatic version and dramatic character piece, and then even though it was like, okay, James Mangold's directing a Wolverine movie, that's fascinating, but it still felt like maybe it's like how Wolverine Origin was originally pitched like as an R-rated revenge movie, but then stuff kind of snowballed, and of course that had a lot to do with the writer's strike, and then it ended up what it was. So it was like, is that what happened here? And then
yeah, I think that was just the big fear, was that, oh God, they can't get over the formula that led to Origins. Like, they can't just make a Wolverine movie straight up. And there was just a lot of doubt towards Fox regarding that, because even though they had made X-Men First Class, which surprised a lot of people, they still had this stigma about them where it was like, okay, going forward, are we going to get more of First Class, or are we going to get more of Origin? Are we going to get more of, like, just some of their lesser movies?
Yeah.
Like it just we didn't know if they had technically learned their lesson yet, because X-Men First Class was a step in the right direction, but, you know, it could have easily just been a one-off, you know, strike at luck type thing. So with Wolverine going into this, it's like virtually everything was against it, because, of course, it's based off that comic book. It's got X-Men Origins Wolverine as its precursor. It's got X-Men 3 as its precursor. It's got virtually no big other X-Men characters in it, which, while it's a good thing for us fans because we know that's not how it's supposed to be portrayed, it's still kind of, you still wonder if there's going to be an audience for just a Wolverine movie.
Yeah.
And, like, it's James Mangold's first comic book movie. You know, sometimes that works out for some people, sometimes that doesn't. So it was just like a combined effort of just, how can this movie be better than the other comic book movies that are coming out this summer? And
then, you know, the reviews started coming in, and they were, I mean, everybody calls them mixed reviews, but technically the percentage of reviews all skew positive, technically.
Yeah.
There does seem to be an overabundance of people who like the movie but don't seem to want to like the movie. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems to have this weird feeling about it. I think just because of X-Men Origins, people don't want to, like... I think because people were looking at this movie this entire summer waiting for it to come out with this skewed look, and, like, when they actually saw it, they, like, didn't want to...
Yeah, it was like, you go in... It's like you go in essentially thinking, oh, it's going to be another X-Men Origins movie. Okay, I pretty much made up my mind about this. Then you see the movie and it's like, what do I do now? I liked it, but I don't know what to do because I wasn't prepared for that.
There's also a lot of reviews who seem to be disappointed that it's not a traditional superhero movie.
Yeah, which is a good strength that a lot of people bring up, which of itself is like, it's kind of a weird debate to even make, because, like, what really makes a superhero movie?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole semantics argument, but...
Yeah, but it's like, I think it's just, people didn't expect this out of, A, Wolverine, or B, the X-Men franchise. Because it's a very different movie than any of the other movies.
No, I mean, tone-wise, there's a lot of mystery noir to it. It's a very character-driven story that has a lot of, humanity, and there's, like, philosophy in it. There's a lot going on that's very different. I mean, the entire draw of the character throughout the movie is him wanting to die. I mean, that's not really normal comic book movie fare.
It's not really even normal X-Men movie fare. It's like, okay, you have a bunch of characters, let's focus on a couple of them, and they'll have like little arcs here and there, and then we'll wrap it up nicely by the end. Even to some extent, First Class was like that.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock against it, that's just the way these movies work. And then you have Wolverine, which is a very singular focus and a singular narrative, and it's like, oh, what is this? Like, it just seemed contrary to everything that's come before, but that's really what a Wolverine movie should have been the first time around, and that's not what Origins was.
And a lot more like the comic than I think we were expecting from those trailers. I mean, was it the comic? It wasn't a direct adaptation of the comic, no. But it had the same focus for the character of Logan, the same point towards the character of Logan that the comic had.
And in some instances, and this is really mostly my opinion, I honestly think this kind of does some things better than the comic. Like, I think this is a good piece for comparison against the comic book, whereas, like, usually when you compare something to something it's adapted from, you only hold what came before up to the standard, and then the other thing has to compare to it.
Yeah.
I think this could actually fit on, like, both levels, like two different levels, because I think the movie does some really interesting things on its own, independent of the comic. And that just kind of makes it all the more fascinating, because it's like, it adds dimension to the movie Wolverine. It adds like a new piece of the puzzle for that version of the character, which has very much not been portrayed as traditional Logan, not as much as in this film, because this film is like, it's pretty much, this is the first time you all have seen Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine.
It feels like that, yeah. Like I said this before, if you close your eyes, you can almost visualize the word balloons, because he just talks and acts so much like the character, more so than he ever has before.
Yeah, and like Hugh Jackman has always been like one of the best comic book character actors that has ever existed, because, you know, he's been Wolverine since 2000. Like, he's been Wolverine since the first X-Men movie, and he's been very good at it, so you don't expect him to ever go up a notch as far as his performance goes, but in this movie he very much does. He takes on the qualities of the character, and that's a large part due to just the faithfulness that the script treats it with.
I mean, it really is like, I don't mean to use this kind of verbiage, but it's definitely like the Dark Knight of Wolverine movies.
Yeah.
Just with how it kind of treats the world and the character. I mean, it really does, even though, unlike the comics, movie Wolverine has never, I mean, he's been in Japan before, but he's not ensconced in the trappings of it. He doesn't speak Japanese, which I think, I heard Chris Claremont saying that, you know, he really should be, but I think for the focus of the story they're presenting,
yeah,
that's still going off of the one presented in the comics, but adding more layers on top of it, which I think is important. Like, they're not removing anything from the comic, they're just adding on top of it.
Yeah, and they're also making it more accessible for the audience, because, you know, it's kind of, when you think about it, it's kind of a weird concept for this character Wolverine to be fluent in Japanese and have a history with Japan when it's never been established in any of the other movies. Like, that's never even been really hinted at.
Yeah.
So it's a way to invite the audience into that side of the character, but at the same time experience the same things as the character as he's experiencing them for the first time, and that makes it more of a, once again, a character piece.
Yeah.
It just invites you into the character's mindset.
Him being an unknown foreigner just adds to his story arc. Like, it works better that way than him already knowing that. Him adopting the culture, essentially, it just works better.
Yeah, not only that, but I love, like, the implication of him being, you know, learning that he's a Ronin. Like, a masterless samurai.
Yeah.
And him coming to terms with what that even means. Like, I think that's a really compelling story.
Yeah. By the way, hearing movie Wolverine call himself a Ronin is the greatest thing ever.
Hearing movie Wolverine, I mean, there's a lot that he does in this movie that's so just amazing to see movie Wolverine do for the first time, but just hearing him say certain things.
Mariko.
Yeah, Mariko. Like, I would never expected to ever see Jackman's Wolverine and a Mariko together, because that's such an integral part of the comics.
This is a comic book fan and a fan of that story and a fan of X-Men and Wolverine. Seeing a live-action Mariko and a live-action Logan fall in love might have been the favorite thing that I watched happen in that movie.
Like, it's the same thing when you see Bale's Batman and Catwoman interacting for the first time.
Yeah.
Or, like, when you see... even, like, going back to the Donner Superman movie. Like, when you see Superman and Lois Lane interacting for the first time, it's like, that's what this is for Logan. Because that's really his... Like, he's sort of got his Gwen Stacy in Mariko.
Yeah.
Because she's the long-lost love from the past, and, you know, she's a very integral part of who he is. And to see that develop in the film world is just... It's incredible, not only as a fan, but just knowing the history behind it, knowing that, you know, there's potential there to mine, even going into future films if they ever brought her back.
Yeah, which I would hope so.
And, like, he also does, like, certain other things that really kind of captured my attention and really got me going as a fan, because, you know, Logan in the other X-Men movies, he's been kind of off-putting, but he's never been rude. Like, he's never been angry.
He's never been an asshole. Like,
yeah.
He's been, you know, he's kind of the anti-hero, kind of wisecracking character in the other movies.
Yeah, and, you know, even when he meets Rogue for the first time, he's trying to, you know, keep his distance from her. You know, he's still inviting. He's still trying to, you know, be a good guy. In this one, like, he flat out tells a dude on his deathbed to essentially piss off.
Yeah.
Like he's a guy who's just had enough. He's been taken through, you know, the absolute worst torment imaginable, and now he's just living out in the wilderness, just kind of an animal of a man. Like, he's just barely human.
Let's talk about the opening of this movie.
Okay, so I think this is the closest to going back to the first X-Men movie that they could possibly do without actually ripping it off. Whereas, like, you start out in an entirely different time, and it's just a great sequence. Yeah,
it's just... And, you know, you're just immediately thrown into Japanese culture with the generals, you know, committing seppuku right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the middle of Nagasaki.
Yeah, and one of the most grotesque visuals of Wolverine's healing factor so far ever put on. Like, I thought in X3 when he's walking up to Jean and, like, his skin's coming off, like, I think that looked visually pretty cool. But this just blows everything away. Like,
and not only that, but this one was very clearly, like, if not halfway practical, then there was a lot of practical makeup there.
Yeah.
And like, there was practical in CG, at least.
And once again, they're kind of playing around with Wolverine's healing factor. Like, sometimes he can heal really fast, sometimes he can't.
Yeah.
I mean, he did heal from a nuclear explosion pretty goddamn quickly there, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, just the visual, like... Okay, that's a big thing about this movie, too, is that it has so many comic book visuals.
Oh, Mangold went crazy. Like, I didn't expect that. There's so much that is just paneled out and shot like it's a comic. Like, just from the graphic nature, with the way the shadows hit things.
Yeah.
Just from it's amazing. I just wasn't expecting that at all. Especially I just thought Mangold would shoot it like a Mangold movie.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, the big scene, of course, as far as visuals go, is him with all the arrows in his back, which is straight out of a Frank Miller poster.
Yeah, there's nothing that looks more Frank Miller ever put on film, and I'm counting 300 in Sin City.
Even the Spears.
Yes, and then that fucking image of him with the arrows and the ropes coming out of his back. Like, it's almost insane how that's in a movie.
Not only that, but it's like just the idea of Wolverine fighting ninjas. That was the big thing with us going in, was that we're finally going to get a movie where Wolverine fights ninjas.
It took over 10 years to get there, but we're finally there. He fought ninjas. A lot was cut out, unfortunately. I know some stuff in the trailers was not, from that fight, was not in the movie, but there's still the rumors of the longer R-rated cut.
Mangold strikes me as the kind of guy who would do a longer cut, so...
I think so.
I hope so.
Jackman did say him and Mangold had discussed an R-rated cut. So, and Mangold practically said, I think right before Comic-Con, that there would be an unrated cut. It just hasn't been 100% confirmed. And whether or not Fox would allow that.
This is borderline R. Like, this movie, as the theatrical version goes, it's borderline R.
Yeah, I mean, they get their one fucking, they're allowed, but he curses a ton.
Yeah, I mean,
he says shit again, every 5 seconds.
The amount of times he says bub.
Oh, he says bub so much. It's amazing. I don't think he just talks like movie Wolverine. But I want to talk about the most faithful part of the book to the movie, which is the opening in Canada with the bear.
Yeah,
that was kind of amazing to see how faithful that was, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah,
I mean they had the dream stuff and
they take it a step beyond the comic. Yeah,
like they kept the poison arrow, and I didn't expect them to go that dark for when he actually kills the bear. Mm-hmm. Like that scene was really played for how dark and sad it was.
And then it just makes it all the sweeter when he goes down to the bar and you can just tell he's just pissed off and he's just got the guy right there. And then it just launches into probably my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, where he's just got the arrow in the guy's hand and just explaining how he didn't have the balls to take out an animal like a man. Like, it's just so Logan that you feel like you're not even watching a movie at that point.
Yeah. And I thought the first time you see the bear, it was pretty obviously CGI, but it wasn't too bad. Yeah. But they did the scene where he actually has to kill the bear. Actually, I would say is superior to the version where he kills the bear in the comics, which is
because in the comics he's hunting the bear.
Yeah, he's there specifically. He's not living in the mountains in the comics.
Yeah.
And he kills the bear in a fight. The dialogue is a lot the same of him telling the bear not to make him do this, but
yeah,
the bear actually writhing on the ground, dying is
and suffering and just it's not like Wolverine's out there to like kill a bear. He hears commotion and he finds this bear that's really just suffering and in pain, and it's. You know what's coming, but you don't want to see it still. And,
Mangold does it well. Like, you see the bear writhe in pain after Wolverine stabs him. Like, it's not right away. The bear doesn't automatically die.
Yeah.
And it really sets the tone for the kind of movie you're about to sit down and watch.
Yeah. Which is just this sobering, really just hard-boiled portrayal of Wolverine, more so than we've ever seen.
Yeah. But it never gets too serious. Like, it never makes itself tongue-in-cheek, but it makes sure to never try to make the character more serious than he is.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't quite go with the Marvel movie method of, like, throwing in a comedic scene every now and then, like, kind of balancing out the tone where it's, like, it's half fun, half serious. It's, like, this is a mostly serious movie, but it still manages to... Actually, I would say it manages to infuse a lot of fun naturalistically.
Yeah, the levity just comes through characters and their interactions and things. Like, they don't and this scene is going to be funny, and this moment's going to be funny. Like, even the bath scene, which is obviously made to finally give you a scene of levity at some point in this movie, is really only funny just because of Wolverine's reaction to the bath, not actually the bath itself.
Yeah. And, like, right after that, it's like he goes to see a dying man.
Yeah, like, in a very serious scene. So, the movie knows how to strike itself really well. And it's just, like, it's very different than anything. Like, it's very neo-noir. Like, even Viper, who doesn't really come across, like, a normal comic book villain in the movie. Like, there's something else just from the way Kodenkova, I think is how you... Kodenchikova, whatever the hell you pronounce her name was. Svetlana, we'll call her, because that's an awesome first name.
Yeah, I can kind of see what you mean, because, like, it doesn't have that scene of her going, wah ha ha ha.
Yeah, it's like just how she, just with the facial expressions, the way they designed her to look, like just from her clothing, it's very like noir, femme fatale, James Bond villain-esque. Like it's just something, it feels like something completely different. Like that scene where she's talking to Harada in the street.
Yeah.
Like the street's a very like Japanese noir kind of setting that they designed there.
Yeah, and she's in a trench coat, and
it's just something so completely different. And a lot of people have been bitching about her performance, but I thought it was great. I actually was completely expecting to hate Viper from performance to just her being in the movie, but I really liked it.
Yeah, I flat out thought that she was going to be the studio forced element of it. Like, I thought, honestly, like, there was no reason for her to be in it. Like, there was no way that this version was going to work. This is just going to be one of those things that you're going to have to kind of ignore in order to enjoy the movie. But it's like, no, she was legitimately a compelling element. And flat out the most comic book accurate Poison Ivy that will ever exist.
And not like Viper from the comics at all.
No, but it's like, what can you say?
Because all those Madam Viper fans out there.
Well, can you imagine, like, trying to put Hydra into a Wolverine Japan movie?
That would be incredible. Though, granted, there are, like, 6 other Marvel Vipers that they could have used.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, it's like, going back to just the noir element of it, it's really, the story of it is very different in that it's kind of like I've seen it compared to, like, The Bodyguard.
Yeah.
It's almost like almost in sort of ways like Leon the Professional or just one of those types of movies where it has a very single goal in mind, which is the hero has to protect someone from being killed. But it doesn't in a way where it's like, it doesn't feel contrived. It doesn't feel like they're trying to place Logan in a situation where he would never be in the comics.
Yeah.
Like this is the natural way that movie Logan would meet Mariko.
Yeah, and I think that relationship really plays out well too.
Yeah, well, they're allowed to breathe.
Yeah, like they actually get more time to just let their relationship breathe than on the run, which is really nice. Like they just kind of go off for a while, and then Mariko is eventually kidnapped again. But between the train and her getting kidnapped again, it's just them being able to interact with each other. And some fascinating stuff. Just the movie isn't afraid to be low key either. Like the scene where he goes to where he was held in the POW camp near Nagasaki. Like he finds the manhole cover that's covered the hole that he was in the beginning of the movie, and he just remembers like the atom bomb going off. It's just stuff like that. It just serves to remind you that Logan's having this crisis of conscience where he really doesn't want to keep living. He doesn't want to keep living as an immortal because, he's extended all of his relationships. He's lived beyond all of his loved ones, and he just doesn't want to keep going anymore. That's why he's in the wilderness, so he won't make any connections. Yeah, he just isolated himself. Yeah. And, even that Ishida sword that young Ishida tries to give him that ends up coming back later and ends up, I guess at the end of the movie, it's Yukio still has it, right? Yeah. She have that on the plane? There's like an engraving on it, and I found out what the engraving says, and it says, never died, never grow old, never being destroyed. And it's amazing that that's never brought up in the actual movie, but it's so pertaining to the plot and sums up Logan's entire story arc in the film so well. Yeah. Like, the movie just got tons and tons of layers to it. And, Logan starts the movie wanting a way out, wanting to die, and Yoshida offers it to him, and he still says no. And I think that says, it's so different than how you would usually see that kind of thing play on a superhero movie, and is so faithful to how the character would actually respond to that. Because it's like, he's not a rookie. He's not like a naive dude at this point. Like, he's been Wolverine for decades now. Like maybe even a century or two. And he's already, like, gone through, what it would be like for, these fantastical
things to happen to him, and he just doesn't want to get involved with any of it because he knows what the kind of road that's going to lead to. And I like just the fact that, okay, Wolverine starts out, he goes to Japan in order to, greet old man Yoshida on his deathbed. And then he just kind of gets swept up into this thing, even though he's supposed to go back on a plane back to Canada the entire time.
Yeah.
Everything just winds up in a way where it's like you would believe Wolverine would stay. It's not like he chooses to undermine his, goal in the beginning. He goes through a change of character throughout the movie. It's not like, oh, well, I have to stay here for plot convenience.
Much like in the comic, it's during the Shingen fight where he just kind of finishes the story arc and really figures himself out.
Yeah. Which is so cool, too, because, it's one of those things where you don't realize what you have until it's gone, because once he gets his immortality taken away and his healing factor, it's like he's completely lost, even though this, in a lot of ways, was what he wanted. Yeah.
And he needs it to protect somebody, but he's unable to.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's like that's the big thing is that ultimately the big part of Wolverine's character is that for all the rage, all the berserker elements, all the, just the negative tendencies of his character, he's a noble person at his complete core. And that's really what the movie focuses on, is that his nobility is what keeps him going.
Yeah, this is getting into comic book territory now, but that's like something that's in Origin, the book, not the movie, where, Wolverine's not really Wolverine in that story specifically, but you see the shades of Wolverine in that he's this just good guy underneath everything.
Yeah. And
the movie plays that out well, plus adding in the berserker rage, which this is the first time it's really been portrayed that well.
Yeah.
Like the Shingen fight where he's just going. The Shingen fight's just awesome. It's one of my favorite parts of the comic, and the fact they ended it this practically the same way, with Wolverine having his fist out, then extending his claws to kill him. Yeah. I was really happy to see. I am disappointed that Shingen kicking Logan's ass in a kendo stick fight wasn't in the movie.
Yeah.
You see Shingen still kicking somebody's ass in a kendo fight, but I think it would have been more important to see that he could legitimately beat the shit out of Logan. Because you kind of go in that fight pretty much knowing Wolverine's going to probably kick his ass.
Yeah.
Still an amazing sword on adamantium claw fight, though.
Which is funny because, the fight leading up to that, where he's battling Yukio, it's like Logan's literally ripping something off of his own heart.
Yeah, he's reaching into him and ripping out of his own chest. Clearly this dude's probably going to survive.
Yeah.
It is funny, we can get into the shaky third act now, but it does interest me in that, the Japan story has, two parts to it. It's everything leading up to the Shingen fight, and then everything after the Shingen fight, which is when the X-Men come in, there's the Silver Samurai, there's Viper, everything's a bit more bigger than it was. It still feels like the Japan story, but there's a little bit more comic booky elements around it. Storm's there. There's Lockheed the Dragon jokes for some reason. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So it's kind of interesting that the movie.
It would have been awesome if they had Lockheed the Dragon jokes.
That would be amazing. Ellen Page just shows up with a dragon.
A CGI purple dragon.
It's adorable. But so it's kind of funny to me. The movie probably inadvertently follows the same path, where Shingen fight ends and then they move on
to the over the top, bigger, but kind of. It's not really the same movie by that point, almost.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's it does retain elements of the Japan story, which I liked, the whole fight in the village with him and the ninjas.
Yeah. And, it ends a lot of Wolverine's character arc in the movie, and it wasn't as over the top as I was expecting it to be.
Yeah. I'm going to say this third act is way better than Iron Man 3's third act.
To be fair, there's nothing actually wrong with what happens in the third act of the Wolverine. It's not bad or anything. It's just unexpected to suddenly have this big literally big CGI villain that he fights.
And not only that, but very obviously CGI.
Yeah, it was
like the bear. The bear, I think, looked pretty good for the most part. As far as, I mean, it was clearly CGI, but it was still not as noticeably CGI as the first time you saw that samurai.
Yeah. Yeah, he needed to fight more of a human element. He needed to. It would have been nice, especially since they set up the Silver Samurai armor earlier in the movie, if he did fight,
an actual
Silver Samurai.
Yeah.
At the same time, he did technically already have a sword on a claw fight not 5 minutes prior to this, so maybe something else was needed. And we still got to, Wolverine picked up the Silver Samurai sword, which wasn't as cool as him picking up a regular sword, but we still saw him use a sword. And his knowledge of that a samurai holds a sword with two hands.
And to be fair to the third act of this movie, it's like we do get to see someone actually manage to cut off Wolverine's adamantium claws, and it doesn't suck. Like, it's not a movie. It's not like that was a bad element. Like I thought it would be.
It actually fits that this is kind of a big Wolverine movie. This is like, I'll say it again, the Dark Knight of Wolverine movies, where he does get his adamantium claws cut off, and now he's back to having bone claws. He still has the skeleton, but now he's back to having bone claws, and that's a pretty big character change. And I think that's nice that not only he goes through a story arc, but he has a change that goes on that will carry through his future appearances now.
Yeah.
Until they give him his adamantium claws back, but
yeah, for at least one more film, he's going to have bone claws.
Yeah. So I think that's cool, and I was expecting to kind of not like him losing his adamantium claws.
Yeah.
But it just...
It fit. I think it helped up the stakes where it's like, it was the first time that Wolverine was made vulnerable like that.
Yeah, and at that point he had his healing factor back, though. So when you see him actually have his claws chopped off, you realize, like, oh, he can actually still die during this fight. Like, and you are seeing him have bodily harm. Something big is happening physically to this character.
Yeah.
Who you're used to just seeing stand still, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's like when you were talking about the Shingen fight. It's like we knew Wolverine was going to win that one. The samurai fight, it's like, no, they've actually found a way to chop Logan in half if they wanted to.
Yeah. And through that fight, Harada actually finishes a character arc. Harada, not anything pretty much like he is. He's not.
No.
Yeah, he's not Mariko's half brother. They went with, former love, which is kind of from. I think Wolverine the X-Men, the cartoon, had that.
Yeah, I think they were weren't they husband and wife?
Yeah, there's something like that. So they kind of split that kind of thing up with the Noboru character as well.
Well, what I didn't expect with the Harada character was that he actually gets a character.
Yeah,
he's not just there to shoot arrows and have action scenes or anything like that. He's not there just to be an obstacle on Logan's way. It's like he gets treated like an actual character, which is not something you really see with characters like that in comic book movies.
No, and he's certainly not a black and white kind of character either.
No.
Like, I would actually like to have seen a lot more of Harada, but, he's not you never get the feeling at all, even though he's doing villainous things occasionally, that he's a villain.
You actually think, he's on Logan's side when he's introduced because, he's protecting Mariko, and he's shooting down, anyone that comes after Logan.
He's clearly a guy who is a good person, but he's doing kind of the honorable thing by following master's orders kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and
he does get redemption there at the very end, which I would like to see him. I know he died, but robots or something. I don't know. I'd like to see him come back as the Silver Samurai. Since he is not the Silver Samurai, Elder Yoshida comes back as the Silver Samurai in kind of a lame reveal.
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
When that happened, I gotta admit, if there was a potential rival to the Mandarin reveal, even though I don't think it's as bad as the Mandarin reveal, I think the Mandarin reveal is 1,000 times worse and movie breaking and a ton of stuff that I won't even get into right now. But
this is more head scratching than anything else.
This was why?
Yeah,
why was that necessary?
I mean, it didn't break the movie or anything. It was just, it's not even, like divorce it from faithfulness to the Silver Samurai. It was just kind of, really?
Yeah, it was like, even, let's say Silver Samurai wasn't even a character from the comics, that the movie made him up. Let's say that we had no prior connection to Silver Samurai, and like, okay, Wolverine is fighting a giant samurai robot. All right, fair enough. Why did they bring the old guy back?
Yeah,
Like,
and it kind of makes a lot of the conspiracy stuff against Mariko a little bit more confusing. Way it ties into the conspiracy stuff that's going on with Wolverine. That's a little bit flimsy how that comes together.
And plus, like, he's there for like essentially 5 seconds, just to kind of say, oh, there's someone in this robot, and then he dies.
Yeah,
Which is like, at that point, you could have just cut his reveal entirely, and the movie would have still been the same way, because at that point, it seemed like the robot had been defeated. And then all of a sudden, he rose up and grabbed Wolverine, and it was just kind of, it was just one of those things where it was like, it's a comic book movie doing a complete 180 and kind of veering off track for a second.
I mean, it did a comic book movie plot thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is why it's
basically the, I'm trying to think of a good comparison from Origins, because there was a couple of moments like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like when Weapon 11 shows up for the first time. It's like, all right, fine. Whatever. I just get the scene over with.
And I'm not even a Weapon 11 hater, and I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that's like, okay, this is kind of the reason that people don't respect comic book movies.
Yeah.
Because there used to be movies with like a chock full of these moments.
Yeah, it's just not necessary, like,
Yeah.
to suddenly have Yoshida as the big villain.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like the movie does well by quickly going back on a course and managing to stick the landing, even though it's like it fell off balance for a second.
Yeah, it makes it work. Like, I'll give it credit for that. It does make Yoshida being in that suit work. Is it a little ridiculous, and I wish that plot was changed in the movie to, maybe Viper was just using Yoshida and just wanted to steal the healing factor for herself for whatever reason or something, but, that just didn't quite come together there. But luckily, it immediately picks back up. I mean, it's quick, and it's not like it's not a movie ruiner when that helmet comes off.
It's just more of, actually, my reaction to it was like, I couldn't tell who it was at first because they kind of pan up, and you only see like the top of the head, and I was like, okay, I guess they're going to reveal that like Shingen actually survived, and he's for some reason in the suit, and it's like, the old man, he's back. Like I honestly did think he was dead. I very much thought he died.
Yeah. It did give Mariko kind of a cool moment where she killed him with Wolverine's severed claws.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool. Good female characters in the movie.
Good performances in the movie. Like, okay, that's a good segue in to talk about the most astounding fact of this movie. The 3 female leads, Mariko, Yukio, and Viper, have not really acted before.
No, Mariko had never been in a movie. Yukio, I think,
had been in like one
short film in Japan.
Then the other one's mostly been in Russian film, so she hasn't had much like experience with American productions.
Yeah, and I didn't even expect her to do an American accent.
Yeah,
which really blew my mind because I think she was learning English.
Yeah.
But
it's like every one of them were fantastic.
Like, Mariko's performance is really kind of understated and subtle and great.
Yeah.
And Yukio just comes off like she could have a franchise of her own.
Yeah, she is easily like the Feora of this movie, I would say.
Definitely.
Like, she's such a great standout moment, and she makes a great sidekick for Logan at the same time, because in the comics, like, Yukio is more or less Wolverine's Catwoman, in a way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, the way she changes sides and stuff, especially in the actual Japan comic. But In this one, like, she's very much his tag-along pal, and in a good way. Like, it's not like this tacked-on thing where you feel like the movie would be better without her. It's like, she's a very great character all of her own.
Yeah, and they thankfully removed any kind of romance aspect from the character in the adaptation, which I think is good and just keeps the focus on Mariko where it should be. And I mean, the film's actually filled with just great Japanese actors. Like, Mangold kind of went crazy with amazing casting.
The only American actors, aside from in the opening or the in credits or after credits scene, I mean, Hugh Jackman and Famke Janssen, I think, are the only two American actors in the movie. Other than
the Canada scenes, pretty much.
Yeah, I forgot about those, but those are mostly just extras. Like, the main cast is all Japanese actors.
Yeah. And
I mean, Will Young Lee is, he was actually in a video game I was playing recently. He was the main voice of, in Sleeping Dogs, which is kind of cool. It was kind of cool going from that to this movie. But, yeah, he's Harada. Rila Fukushima? Yeah, Fukushima as Yuiko. Hiroyuki Sanada as Shingen.
Who I've seen in a couple Japanese films, and I've always liked him.
Yeah. He was pretty good. He was a pretty menacing Shingen.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen a lot more of him. That was one of the things I was disappointed. I would like to have seen more Sinjin as kind of an upfront kind of villain for a while.
See, all he had to do was put on the full armor.
I was kind of hoping he was going to put the samurai mask on too, but at least he wore some armor. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. He would have been a great Silver Samurai. But Tao Okamoto is Mariko, who, once again, first time she has ever acted.
Acted in general. She's just plain old model and does exceptional.
Yeah. Like, I think in an interview she said, like, a lot of the time Jackman himself was kind of coaching her through the scenes, which is cool. Because it's like, you can kind of see their bond on screen in that, you know, she's teaching him certain things, he's teaching her certain things. It's just fantastic, the chemistry that these two have.
Yeah.
Svetlana
Kochenkova.
Yeah, Kochenkova, Viper. Brian T., who is actually, he provides a pretty good laugh in the movie, because he's the guy who's going to marry Mariko.
Yeah, not a big role, but it's still pretty good, and gets a Diamonds Are Forever reference, which is pretty great.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie, actually, is when that happens.
Yeah. And then there's also that great, you only have 9 words. Just slaps him in the face. How many was that? Just slaps him in the face again. It's so good. That scene really reminded me of something you would see in, like, an Asian movie. Like, there was a lot of that where Mango was clearly inspired by a lot of Japanese films and put a lot of that flavor in there. That's why I think it has such a unique feeling to it.
Yeah. I mean, it is a Wolverine in Japan story. It's not like Japan is the backdrop.
Yeah. It's almost like, and Mango will get his way, the entire movie would have probably been subtitled. And a lot of it is, actually. I was kind of surprised by the percentage of the movie that was subtitled.
Yeah.
Like, there's only a couple times where 2 Japanese characters without any American or Canadian around speak English to each other.
Yeah.
Mangold treats it realistically, like, these 2 characters would be speaking Japanese to each other, they wouldn't be speaking English.
Yeah. Even, like, for scenes, even at, towards the end, towards the third act, when things are gearing up, it's like, you still have that scene of Yukio and Harada talking to each other and speaking to each other in Japanese. Yeah.
And that's in, the midst of all, this stuff going down. There's a fucking giant robot. Wolverine's about to have his fucking bone marrow taken out. And then you cut away to subtitles.
Yeah, we completely cut into the third act where stuff like that you wouldn't traditionally see, which is great.
Yeah. And it plays so well. I just like how it doesn't treat the audience like idiots. Yeah. And if they can't keep up, then that's really their own fault.
But also, I really like that they don't throw Japan in anyone's face. They don't make it this overwhelming, intimidating thing where it's you're really kind of sucked out of the movie because of a cultural difference or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's as natural as any of the other X-Men movies.
Yeah, and they, really bring in the culture well, and they pick which pieces of culture to bring in, if it's going to add to the film and to Wolverine's arc.
Which it does.
Just the scene with him and Mariko having dinner, where they're talking about things as...
Yeah, where she keeps telling him, to take the chopstick and put them flat down.
Yeah. Like, just little things, and actually seeing Wolverine use chopsticks is kind of amazing. Gigantic fucking Hugh Jackman.
Seeing Wolverine just do so many things in this movie, like that scene where he goes up to the hotel and it's like space themed.
That was great. They go to the Love Hotel.
Yeah.
Once again, just adding the Japanese flavor to the movie and just making it just something completely different. And still manage to have ninjas in the movie, and it still feels different.
Yeah.
And still really great action scenes. Like, everybody thought even I thought from the trailers, the bullet train scene was going to be the stupidest thing in the world.
Because it was kind of like, at that point, the green screen really hadn't been finished.
Yeah, it was very obviously unfinished effects. Yeah,
so it's like, it just kind of looked like one of those, like the helicopter sequence in Origins.
Yeah.
Really.
But that was hands down one of probably the best action scene I've seen in a summer movie this year. In a movie this year, period.
And not only that, but it's like that entire sequence is based around a great joke that gets a great punchline, and that Mariko doesn't have any clue this is happening.
Has no idea that Wolverine's fighting Yakuza on top of the train this entire time.
She's just listening to music.
And, you see even the beginning of the fight in the train where he's like, it's close quarters, just throwing people around. And then they get on top of the train and it's just like...
And people are just dying left and right. It's like, it doesn't... That's another thing about this movie is that it doesn't shy away.
It's very violent.
Wolverine actually gets blood on his claws for once.
He has blood on his claws. You flat out hear Yukio just snap a guy's neck really loudly and kill a guy.
Wolverine gets shot a lot.
It's just bleeding all over the place.
Yeah.
And you see ninjas just killing guys in silence. One of my favorite sequences when they're going through the Yoshida compound, just breaking guys' necks and just stabbing them and all that. And then the Shingen fight where Logan has one sword like going through his torso all the way out the back, and then one straight through his chest all the way out the back. And he just breaks the blade and pulls out the other one. Right. Oh, it's so good. It's so amazing to see. It's a really great movie. I wish people would be more welcoming of it and especially support it because it's so different than anything else we've seen. Even the score I thought was really good and very different like everything else in the movie.
Like, I would say, in terms of ranking it with the other X-Men movies, this one, for me, is probably neck and neck with X-Men, the first one, and then just under First Class. I've not seen X-Men 2 in a very long time, so I would have to watch that again in order to be sure, but if it comes even close to First Class, in my estimation, it's good, because First Class is my all-time favorite X-Men movie.
If we're counting best X-Men movies, I would still say, in no particular order, X-Men 2, First Class, The Wolverine. I think they all should definitely be grouped together at this point. They are, hands down, the best of the X-Men franchise.
Yeah.
And Wolverine definitely deserves to be up there. I don't... Even... Other than I want to see more of Wolverine and Yukio palling around after the events of this movie, it's almost like I don't even know where else they would go for this. Because it almost feels like Wolverine needs to go back to the X-Men after the end of this movie.
Yeah, because they've done it. They've cracked the code.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone could tell by the way we were talking about it, but how would you recommend this movie?
MB, Box Office Pulp recommends The Wolverine.
Snick it.
But for this episode, I've been Mike.
I've been MB.
And go fuck yourself, pretty boy.
And like that, he's gone.